Yo, DC fans! Ever heard of some DC characters that are totally underrated? Like, they're awesome, but nobody talks about them. Well, get ready to meet your new favorite heroes and villains. We're counting down the top 10 forgotten DC characters. Hit that like button, and let's dive in. 10. The Creeper.
I know you. Last time we met, you were working for, dramatic pause, the Joker.
You probably haven't heard of him, but there's this totally weird dude in the DC Comics world called the Creeper. His real name is Jack Ryder, and he was cooked up by this comic book guy named Steve Ditko. Back in the day, Ryder was this chill talk show host who was also a snooping reporter. Then, boom, he finds this crazy serum that turns him into a green-haired, yellow-skinned freak with a wild red mop on his head. Not only did he get super strong and fast, but he also went kinda nuts. Like, really nuts. This transformation made him into the Creeper, a chaotic, unpredictable superhero, or maybe supervillain, depending on the day, who fights crime with a crazy, over-the-top style. So, the Creeper started off as this weird mix of creepy thriller and superhero stuff. Created by the same guy who made Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, you'd think he'd be huge, right? But nope. Even though he was kinda unique, the Creeper just couldn't catch a break. He popped up here and there in comics, but never really stuck around. People tried to revamp him, but it never worked. Why is he such a loser? Well, for starters, he's got this split personality thing going on. Half normal dude, half crazy green monster. That's not exactly your typical superhero deal. Plus, he's got this wild look and acts kinda nuts, which makes it hard to fit him into regular comic book stories. And let's face it, there are a ton of other superheroes out there who are more, like, normal and relatable. So, poor Creeper just got lost in the shuffle. Basically, he's the underdog who never made it to the big leagues. 9. Azrael. Azrael is this totally messed up dude from DC Comics, who first showed up in 1992. His real name is John Paul Valley, and he was just a normal college guy until some creepy religious group brainwashed and supercharged him to be their killer. Talk about a bad trip. Now he's got this split personality thing going on and wears this crazy armor with a flaming sword. He's like a walking contradiction. Super strong and skilled, but also totally lost. Azrael got his biggest moment during the Nightfall thing. Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, was all messed up after a fight with this dude named Bane. So Azrael was like, "I got this!" But he totally went off the rails. The guy was brutal, didn't care about anyone, and was basically the opposite of Batman. Can you imagine? It was crazy. Eventually, Bruce healed up and had to take back the Batman gig. That whole fight between them really showed how conflicted Azrael was. He wanted to be a hero, but his messed up past kept getting in the way. Azrael used to be a big deal in the DC world, but he kind of fell off the map. His story was super dark and twisted with a whole religious cult thing going on. It was hard for people to connect with him, you know? After that whole Nightfall mess, his part in the Batman story got way smaller, and then DC kept changing things up and Azrael just got lost in the shuffle. They've tried to bring him back a few times, but he's still mostly a side character. It's a shame, because his story is actually pretty interesting, this whole look into the crazy side of being a vigilante. But with so many new heroes and stories popping up, it's tough to stay relevant. 8. Son of Vulcan. So this dude named Johnny Man was just a regular reporter, chillin'. Then boom, he meets Vulcan, the Roman god, and gets this crazy upgrade. Like super strength, fireproof skin, and a bunch of other awesome stuff. They made him their Earth champ or something. He became this superhero called Son of Vulcan, mixing myths and superhero action. Pretty wild, right? His first comic came out in the 60s, so he's kinda like an old school hero. Son of Vulcan had a cool concept going for him with that whole mythological thing, but he just couldn't catch fire in the DC world. 7. Space Cabby. So, there's this guy, right? They call him Space Cabby, but nobody knows his real name. He first showed up in a comic book back in 1954, Mystery in Space, issue 21. This dude's basically a space taxi driver zooming around the galaxy and picking up all sorts of crazy aliens. It's like a mix of sci-fi and comedy, with Space Cabby always getting caught up in wild adventures. He's like the Han Solo of the comic book world, but without the cool spaceship. So Space Cabby was kinda cool, right? But let's be real, he never really took off. I mean, he was around in the 50s and 60s when comics were all about trying new stuff. But then superheroes blew up and everyone wanted that action. Space Cabby was more like a chill dude hanging out in space, not really fighting bad guys or saving the world. So yeah, he's kind of a forgotten character now, except for maybe a few comic book nerds who remember him. 6. Aztec. Aztec, or Aztec the Ultimate Man, is a comic book hero dreamed up by Grant Morrison and Mark Millar. He first showed up in 1996 in DC Comics' Aztec the Ultimate Man #1. The guy behind the mask is Uno, raised and trained by a super secret group called the Q Society to be like the ultimate badass to fight this ancient evil called the Shadow God. They hooked him up with a super cool suit that lets him fly, shoot energy blasts, and be super strong and tough. Aztec's story is all tied up in old Mesoamerican myths, and he's supposed to save the world from total disaster. Even though he's got a cool backstory and awesome powers, his comic book didn't really take off and got canceled after just 10 issues. So why did Aztec kinda disappear? Well, his comic book didn't really take off, so it got canceled fast. Even though he hung out with the Justice League for a bit, he never really got a chance to shine or be in any big stories. 5. Bane Beast. There's this superhero called Bane Beast who's like totally underrated. He first popped up in comics way back in 1967. This dude, Mike Maxwell, was just a normal dude working in Africa when BAM! He gets hit by lightning and drinks some crazy potion. Next thing you know, he can talk to animals and even mix them up to make super animal combos. He wears this wild helmet and loincloth thing and hangs out in the jungle fighting bad guys and protecting animals. Pretty cool, right? Bane Beast is kind of a forgotten guy, you know? His stories are mostly about animals and Africa, which isn't everyone's cup of tea. He hasn't been in too many comics lately, and when he does show up, it's not like a big deal. He's been in a few cartoons, but that hasn't really made him famous. With all the other cool superheroes out there, he just kind of got lost in the crowd. 4. The Inferior 5. The Inferior 5 is a comedic superhero team introduced in DC Comics Showcase No. 62 in 1966, a creation of writer E. Nelson Bridwell and artist Joe Orlando. This quintet of bumbling heroes are the offspring of more celebrated Golden Age superheroes. The group comprises Merriman, a son of strength and glamour, Dumb Bunny, a super strong but intellectually challenged blonde, Awkwardman, possessing immense strength offset by extreme clumsiness, White Feather, a skilled archer plagued by fear, and the Blimp, capable of flight but at a painfully slow pace. Their adventures are a humorous deconstruction of superhero tropes filled with slapstick comedy and lighthearted action. The team even starred in their own short-lived series in the late 1960s, successfully blending comedic elements with traditional superhero narratives. The Inferior 5 just never really caught on. Their goofy, joke-telling style wasn't what most people wanted from superheroes back in the day. Plus, with so many comics coming out, it was tough for a silly group like them to stay in the spotlight. They've popped up here and there over the years, but mostly as cameos or quick reboots that didn't last. So they kind of got lost in the shuffle. With all the big-name heroes hogging the limelight, it's been hard for the Inferior 5 to get their own shine. 3. Ultram Man, Gary Conquered. Ultram Man, or Gary Conquered if you want to be formal, is basically a forgotten superhero from DC Comics. He showed up for the first time in this old comic, All-American Comics #8, way back in 1939. The guy was made by some dude named John L. Blummer. Anyway, Ultram Man lives in this super future world, like the 22nd century, and he's all about fighting bad guys. His dad was a smart guy who invented this crazy stuff that made you super strong and tough. After his dad died, Gary picked up the superhero thing and became Ultram Man to keep doing what his dad started. It's like a mix of sci-fi and superhero stories, you know? The kind of stuff they were into back in the day when comics were all about happy endings and a bright future. Ultram Man, or Gary Conquered, is basically a forgotten DC hero. He only showed up in a few old comics, and then poof, he was gone. Plus, he was from the future, which was kind of weird for people back then. Most heroes were like, down-to-earth and relatable, you know? Unlike them, Ultram Man didn't really stick around or get any cool updates. So yeah, he's just one of those lost characters in the giant DC world. 2. the Forever People. So, there's this group of superheroes called the Forever People. They're like the young, fresh faces of a bigger comic book story called The Fourth World. This dude named Jack Kirby came up with them. They're from a cool planet called New Genesis and are always battling these bad guys from another planet, Apocalypse. The team is like 5 friends with superpowers. One's super strong, another can make illusions, and there's even one who can control metal. When they join forces, they become this mega powerful dude. They're basically the good guys fighting against this evil dude named Darkseid. He Forever People? Yeah, they're kind of like the underdogs of the DC world. They had this cool thing going on with their superpowers and this crazy story, but it just never really took off. Their comic book run was short-lived, and the whole story behind them got cut off before it really got going. Plus, they never got the big movie or TV show treatment like Superman or Batman. So, most people don't even know who they are. It's a shame, because they're actually pretty awesome. 1. Challengers of the Unknown. The Challengers of the Unknown are like the original Adventure Squad. They were created by a famous comic book guy named Jack Kirby. These 4 buddies, a pilot, a diver, a daredevil, and a wrestler, were in a plane crash that almost killed them. But instead of giving up, they decided to become super explorers, hunting down monsters and weird stuff. They were like the test run for the superhero teams we know today, like the Fantastic Four. Their comics were a mix of sci-fi, magic, and scary stuff, and they set the stage for a lot of the things we see in superhero comics now. The Challengers of the Unknown were totally hot stuff when they first hit the scene. They were like the coolest, right? But then, boom, all these flashy, super-powered dudes started popping up and stealing the spotlight. The Challengers didn't have any crazy abilities, so they kind of got lost in the shuffle. They've popped up here and there over the years, but they've never really been as big a deal as they used to be. It's like they're one of those old-school bands that everyone forgets about. All right, that's a wrap on our forgotten DC heroes and villains. So, who was your fave? Drop a comment and let us know. If you're vibing with this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more DC craziness. Peace out for now.